odd, but in any event.
Yeah, I didn't know what they were either, so actually I'd asked the clerk's staff to see what they were. I don't have anyone subpoenaed, but I do have, I believe, 3 individuals who would like to speak, the victim's mother, sister, and brother.
Okay. Generally, when I do that, I have them stand up between those pillars right there. If there was somebody on the Zoom, I'd actually have them sit at the table by a microphone. Nobody's on the Zoom. Can we address that briefly, Mr. Lizzie, too? You indicated to me that you thought there might be some people wanting to Zoom in, but they're not in.
Correct, and I think our victim witness staff is checking with them. I know that Mr. Denny's daughter is in another state, and I think she had anticipated Zooming in for this, and his brother, I believe, is in an institution. I believe he was going to also try to Zoom in,
Okay.
but I think they have the information.
All right. Just for the edification of everyone, we had a couple of hearings ahead of time before this one, and both of those hearings involved some Zoom appearances, and they're all using the same Zoom number. And nobody for this case was on those Zoom numbers. After those cases were done, I disconnected and reconnected the Zoom because we were having some audio glitches. Still, no one has showed up either in those hearings in that Zoom number or in this hearing. So I'm going to proceed irrespective of that. But if you'd like to have those individuals step forward, then I'll just have them stand right between those pillars right there. And you can address the court. Right there is good, yeah.
Is it okay right here, sir?
Sure.
Thank you. Would I be addressing to you or?
Yes, to me.
We are here today for my brother, Randall Mitchell Denny. He was a son, a father, and a brother. He lit up the room when he walked in. He made people laugh. He was a comedian. At times, he was also a lovely brother, whoever was around him. He was a brother who I had the pleasure to have the same birthday of him, and also as the same birthday week we shared together. He was a lovely father who loved spending time with his children, playing games or watching cartoons. Sadly to say, you would never be able to do that together with them again because of you. He liked just hanging out, just being a dad. He graduated from college, a trade school, a grade A, which he loved to do. It hurts to know that my brother will never be able to see his first grandchild be born, or his children going through their first highlights in their life. He won't be here to watch his children grow physically, to say he was so proud of them for their accomplishments. My brother had a disease. He wanted to change. He wanted to have peace and to be healthy, to be happy, to have a lovely lifestyle, and to change it because it wasn't showing no love to him, because all it was doing was kept bringing him down. As the trial begins, I asked God to give my mother the strength she needs to get through this, because she lost a child. This one who had plans for her to buy a big house, not a fancy car, but a big house, so she didn't have to work so hard as she did to keep a roof over our heads when need to be. But you made a choice to go get your stuff back. And now look where you're at. And now look where you're at. You're in prison for the consequences you did to my brother. You planned to beat him up. And then, for some reason, you bring a gun with you. Like you needed to defend yourself. Like he was a big guy. Funny thing is, you guys were taller than him. My brother was a fighter, and he must have been getting the best of you. The best of you guys. And you got scared. That's why you shot him like he was a dog. Now for that, we had no more holidays together. No more birthdays together. I'm the oldest of 4 children. The only girl. So I had to be a big sister and a mother to my brother Randall. We had a family. We had family times or just hanging out together, and we would no longer have any more of those because of you guys decided to get your jobs tonight. On this day of April 30th, changed my life. I suffer from depression and anxiety because of this crime you guys decided to commit that day. Like kill my brother. For that reason, I would like you to sit every single day of your sentence and think about what you did to my brother. I want you to really think about and understand that taking a person's life will cost you yours too. Every day I'm hurting for myself. Every day I'm hurting for my family because of the pain you have caused us. I hope you're hurting like we are hurting, but we'll be hurting for many more years as you. You're getting, I said many more as you. You're from the. I hope the judge gives. You get from the judge. Say for how many years you get from the judge. I want you to remember that. I will never have that chance again to see my brother like you will be able to see your brothers, sisters, or mother. My brother will never have that chance again. The chains you wear around your ankles and the chains you wear around your hands, I want you to know those were my brother's life that was worth something you took from us. And I want you to think about that every single day. And there are no winners in the drug game. Alejandro, we're here today because you took something you didn't give. You took my son's life. My son meant the world to all of us, to all of his family. He was a person who brought laughter, joy, and smiles to everyone. Our holidays are never the same anymore. Your mother would never understand the pain that you put me through. Because she still has you and your brother who was convicted of the same crime. Taking Randall's life. I'll never get to hold Randall, ever. I'll never have a conversation with him, even if it was behind bars or on a phone. Never, ever will I have a conversation with him. He is a father and a grandfather to a baby he never got to lay his eyes on. Something you took from him, his daughter, and his granddaughter. The pain you have caused me is endless. I have sleepless nights to this day. I couldn't eat for months. I have a huge hole in my heart that will never end. You shattered my whole heart, and the only thing that's mending it is the love for my son. And the fact that I refuse to let you kill me too. Whatever time you're sentenced to will never be enough. Because I'll never get to enjoy any time with Randall again. I could go on and on, but the devastation you have caused this family, there's never enough words to express.
Judge, thank you for looking over the case. Appreciate that. To the DA's office, thank you for all the hard work, years of hard work, hours, countless hours of hard work, dedication towards this case. Really appreciate that. My family appreciates that. Randall was a lot more than an addict. He was depicted to be throughout this trial. He was a person, he was a father, brother, son, dad, soon now grandfather. It hurts to know that, his 5 children are now going to have to go through life without a father figure leading them the way, without a dad walking them down the aisle, a dad in the stands cheering them on. Just the dad being there to mentor them and guide them. It hurts to know that, he's no longer going to be there at, family gatherings and, Christmases and Thanksgivings. You still have that. You still have that with your family. They can come see you, they can still talk to you. We no longer have that. I think that is the deepest part of the pain. It's no longer tangible. He's gone. All because of some material things, and it's sad to see the community here, how ravaged it is with this epidemic. It hurt me to see this trial and, how many people are living like this. I can't believe that this is happening in our society. It's unbelievable to me that you would want to live like this. But this is the repercussions of it. This is the repercussions of it. And just God bless you. That's all I could say. I wish you no harm. God bless you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lezay.
Thank you, Your Honor. The state is here today to make recommendations regarding what we believe to be an appropriate sentence for Alejandro Cantu, primarily as it relates to the felony murder charge for which he's being sentenced here today, but then also for the drug crimes for which he's entered pleas, or to which he's entered pleas. I'll start with the recommendation. It is the state's recommendation here that the defendant be sentenced to a period of 15 years of initial confinement, followed by a period of 10 to 15 years of extended supervision. That is the recommendation as it relates to the felony murder charge. And then I would ask that the defendant receive concurrent prison sentences regarding the drug charges that are associated with the other cases. It's always difficult to have the conversations with the crime victims' families about what took place and to make a sentence recommendation for Mr. Cantu's conduct, and that this court is to consider the sentencing factors that are outlined in Galleon. What this court is not assigned to do is to somehow try to place a value on the decedent's life. I've heard many judges in many circumstances say that the one sentence they wish they could give is to make all of this go back in time and bring back the loved one that's been lost. And I know that the court doesn't have that power, but the court certainly would do that if it could. There is no recommendation that can bring Mr. Denny back to us. We simply cannot accomplish that. But what we can do is achieve the means of justice by issuing a sentence that appropriately addresses the seriousness of Mr. Cantu's conduct, that looks at what his rehabilitative needs are, that looks at the public safety value to this community, the protection of the public in this community, And I think that the state's recommendation is trying to balance all of those factors. Give Mr. Cantu credit where it's deserved for accepting responsibility in this case when he did take responsibility and enter a plea. Unfortunately for this family, that didn't relieve them from having to go through a jury trial. But Mr. Cantu, this Alejandro Cantu, did accept his responsibility and enter a plea in this case. I think the court in this case is in a unique position for a plea case in that you've had the opportunity to hear much of the evidence that was presented at Gustavo Cantu's trial, so the court has a better understanding of the facts and circumstances of this case than it would absent having a trial. I think that the recommendation of the state takes into account Alejandro Cantu's conduct and his involvement in this case and considers the seriousness of this offense. Obviously, we've heard from just 3 of the many family members who are here today in support of Mr. Denny and can talk about the value that he had to them as a person. And I'm so glad that his brother had the opportunity to speak and to share, particularly with the court, that Mr. Denny is more than an addict. He is a brother, a son. He was a friend, a cousin. He had value. His life had value. And that despite the fact that he was involved in this drug game, in this drug trade, and despite the conduct that he engaged in as it relates to Alejandro and Gustavo, taking their items, he did not deserve what happened to him. This community is absolutely plagued with a drug epidemic. And Alejandro Cantu is part of that. He was dealing drugs in this community. That was very clear from the facts and the circumstances of this case. He was dealing drugs. He was involved with guns. That is a game that people play and a lifestyle that people choose to live, and it has this repercussion that when drugs and violence are combined together, we see results like this. Whether those results were intended or not, when Mr. Cantu went to the scene that night to confront Randall Denny, whether that was his intent to kill him, obviously that's not what he entered a plea to. It was his intent to confront him, and this is the result. This was the likely result. He knew that this was a possible result. This is very, very serious conduct. And when I read the pre-sentence investigation and when I read the defense sentencing memorandum, one of the things that I think is cited many times is Mr. Cantu's substance abuse history, his drug use, and the suggestion that his drug use is what contributed to this ultimately happening. And while certainly his drug addiction and his choices to live in that lifestyle and live in the drug game absolutely contributed to this death, we had the opportunity to see Alejandro Cantu on video at many points through the events of the evening and the early morning. And this isn't a situation where Mr. Cantu was himself significantly impaired by drugs at the time of the homicide. You had the opportunity to observe him as he's walking up and down the steps, as he's having conversations with other individuals. His judgment did not appear to be significantly impaired. His physical abilities did not appear to be significantly impaired. This is not a situation where it appeared that he was intoxicated to the point where he is not making rational choices. He very much appeared to be making rational choices as the court had the opportunity to observe him on video, coming and going from his apartment, having conversations with other individuals on scene about confronting Mr. Denny. So this is clearly very significant conduct, and Mr. Cantu was aware of that conduct. When we look at his history, he does have a significant prior criminal history. It's certainly not the most egregious criminal history that we've seen, but nonetheless, it does involve drugs. It involves drug use and maintaining drug trafficking place. Now with the charge that he's been convicted of, clearly both use and distribution of narcotics are part of his history, and he does have a violent history. I know there were comments in there that he would never do harm to another person or didn't want to do harm to another person. He has several battery convictions. They are misdemeanor battery convictions, but there are several battery convictions, and they span a significant length of time. I think the first battery conviction was prior to 2010, and he's got another battery conviction from 2018, which I think is conduct from 2015, to be fair to Mr. Cantu, but there are several battery convictions over the length of time. So how Mr. Cantu responds when he's frustrated or when he's upset. He has reacted with violence in the past. Most of those have been within the context of a domestic violence relationship, but certainly that demonstrates a dynamic that he's willing to hurt even the people that he loves if he's upset with them. He clearly was upset with Randall Denny because Randall had taken something from him, taken his drugs, taken his guns, put him in a bad situation, impacted his credibility on the street, whatever the reason was. He clearly was upset with Mr. Denny and wanted to confront him. That confrontation took place and Mr. Denny was killed. It didn't need to happen. It's absolutely senseless violence in this community, and it's the result in large part of Mr. Cantu's conduct. And in terms of the need to protect the public, I think that simply dovetails into that argument, is that this notion of drug use, drug delivery, and the violence that's associated with that, when Mr. Cantu is a major player in that system, he presents a significant public safety risk, and there needs to be confinement to keep this community safe. I think the 15-year recommendation balances all of those factors. I don't think it egregiously addresses, it's certainly not an unduly disproportionate sentence when we look at his conduct. It's 2/3 of the maximum period of confinement that's available to the court in this particular case. Felony murder is an unusual unclassified felony. It's a 30-year total sentence maximum. The maximum period of confinement is governed by the statute for unclassified felonies and can be 75% of the total sentence. So the maximum that he's looking at in terms of confinement is 22.5 years. And as Ms. Rock indicated, the ES, there's no limitation on the ES other than it has to be at least 25% of the confinement portion of the sentence per statute. So the state is asking that the court impose 15 years of initial confinement and 10 to 15 years of extended supervision. Again, I think that recommendation pales in comparison to the loss that the Denny family has suffered here, but it is appropriate in considering all of the factors that are before the court here today, including the facts and Mr. Alejandro Cantu's specific involvement in committing this offense. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Rock and Mr. Lopez, I don't know if the two of you talked, I don't know who wants to go first.
You know, I think that since my cases are the least severe of all three of them, I should go first. Thank you, and I'll be brief as Attorney Rock. I'm sure we'll cover most of the information that needs to be covered. You know, as to the sentencing recommendation of 1 year of initial confinement and 2 years of extended supervision for each one of the counts, we ask that the court follow that as concurrent to each other as into the 22 CF case. I can tell the court that by my calculations, my client has 331 days of credit for the 1673 case and 287 days to the 2124 case. And, you know, my client is here taking responsibility for his drug, for his pleas to his drug case charges against him. You know, I think it's obvious by reading through the pre-sentence investigation that Mr. Cantu has a drug addiction and that he needs help addressing that addiction. I think when it comes to his drug cases, the focus should be on rehabilitation. If the court looks on page 31 of the PSI, Mr. Cantu began his sad and long relationship with drugs and alcohol when he was a teenager, when he started, I believe, at 14 with alcohol, and then minor drugs like marijuana, and then more severe drugs as years went by. Unfortunately, you know, my client also didn't have someone in his family to model him the proper way to address his life when he has stresses. Unfortunately, if the court looks at page 22 of the PSI, Mr. Cantu's father has had a long history of alcohol abuse. His brother Gustavo, and this court is aware of Mr. Gustavo Cantu, also has a long history of alcohol and drug abuse. And then also his older brother Carlos, who's sadly not with us anymore, also had a long history of drug and alcohol abuse. So all those people that would have helped Mr. Cantu and would have led him in the right path, unfortunately muddled the wrong way for Mr. Cantu. Mr. Cantu also stated that the friends that we had, and those are on page 28 and 29 of the PSI, also have their own issues with alcohol and drug abuse. As it comes to these cases, but it was also mentioned by the state and by the people who spoke prior to the state, Mr. Cantu has issues with has issues with abuse of drugs and alcohol that have taken time away from him to spend it with his family. He has 6 daughters with whom he hasn't been able to spend any time with in the past few years because of his problems with alcohol and drugs. We ask that the court follow the recommendation and that when Mr. Cantu does get out of prison, that he has the ability to address his alcohol and drug abuse needs in an outside facility where he could hopefully be able to defeat his demons that have led him to this path. He's a family man, and he understands that his actions have hurt himself, his family, and others. So we ask that the court follow the recommendation in regards to his drug cases. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Ms. Rock.
Thank you, Your Honor. With regard to 22 CF 1067, as noted in the defendant's sentencing memorandum, we are asking the court to consider a sentence consisting of 5 years of initial confinement followed by 3 years of extended supervision. I think it's absolutely agreeable that this is a very serious case, even with the amendment that occurred. And it involved essentially the tragic and senseless loss of an individual's life. But importantly, there's never been a time or a place, I think, where anybody has believed that Alejandro is the individual that pulled the trigger. He did not do that. He did not know that this was going to occur when he went to get his property back. And I think that's incredibly important to highlight here and to understand that at the end of the day, Mr. Cantu is being sentenced for the crime with which he pled to and took responsibility for. And importantly, he did take responsibility. He took responsibility for having gone to the scene that night. He took responsibility for essentially wanting to confront Randall to get his property back and to talk to him about what had occurred. But he in no way and at no time intended for somebody to die that evening. I think that's further evidenced. Attorney Lassay had talked about how the court had an opportunity to see some of the video recordings of Mr. Cantu that were ultimately captured on the night in question. And after this incident took place, he went back to a residence where some of his children and the mother of those children were staying. And when he is seen going into that apartment, he's incredibly emotional, and he tells her that he never knew that this was going to happen. And he didn't. I don't think that there's any evidence within this record, and I agree that the court is in a different situation than normal, having heard a trial with regard to one of the co-defendants. Certainly there was evidence that was not presented at that trial that I would have presented should we have been in that same situation or challenged. But the facts are what they are, and that is that there was never a plan for somebody to be killed. At most, I think it could be said that there was a plan to meet up with Randall and to confront him. And ultimately, that is what Mr. Cantu took responsibility for. He wanted to get his belongings back. When he got on scene, he had met with his brother and his cousin, Mr. Ventura. Jacob and Mr. Cantu, Alejandro Cantu, had walked up to the car. And it's at that time that Mr. Alejandro Cantu is looking into the vehicle to locate a backpack where he believed his property would be. There were other people on the scene that night. The scene was incredibly chaotic. I think some of that was demonstrated by a Denny motion that was argued by the defense earlier in this case. It's without a question that there were other individuals on scene. Mr. Cantu's looking for the backpack, and when he gets out of the vehicle, he hears yelling, and very soon after that, that's when he hears the shots that he did not know were going to be fired that evening. He did not have a gun on his person. Nobody ever claims to have seen a gun on him. And witnesses that were interviewed by law enforcement in this case are all on the same page that they don't even know Mr. Cantu to carry a firearm on his person. He has no record of carrying a firearm or any other types of weapons. That's out of character for him, and it's not what he was in possession of on the night in question. He was just looking for this backpack. When he heard the shots go off, he ran to his car, and that's when he went back originally to the residence where his children were staying at. After that, he did go to Tigerton for the night, and then the very next morning, he went and he brought his children to the circus. I think that's also evidence that he, in fact, did not know that this was going to occur. And I don't say any of this to try to minimize what ultimately happened here. Somebody did lose their life. A family is seriously affected by this. But there's more than just one family that's been affected by this. Mr. Cantu's family is affected by this in numerous ways. It's not only him that's sitting before the court today, but pretty soon so is his brother and so is his cousin. This is a community that was ravaged by substances, by drugs. And this did not have to occur, but it did. And again, Mr. Cantu is taking responsibility for that. I think it's important to know that, well, I don't think justice can ever really be served when an individual does lose their life, especially after something so insignificant over the taking of property, that other individuals who do hold more culpability than Mr. Alejandro Cantu are going to be sentenced for their own actions. But this is an individualized sentencing, and the court has to look at Mr. Cantu's actions on the night in question as well as his overall character. I think that if the state ever truly believed that there was a plan on the night in question to ultimately kill somebody or to take somebody's life, then I think that would have been evidenced by McKenna Shentis having been charged in this case. And I just want to highlight this because I think it is, again, important to note what every individual, in fact, was responsible for. And if there was, in fact, this plan to intentionally harm Randall in some fashion, then I think McKenna Shentis would have been just as responsible, as he was the one who ultimately drove Randall to the scene that night. And he actually met up with Randall, and it was Randall who decided where they were going to go. And it was testimony in Mr. Gustavo Cantu's trial showed that Mr. Shentis didn't, in fact, know that Alejandro was, quote unquote, looking for Randall. It was simply a matter of he was going to meet up with Alejandro later that evening. He called him. Alejandro asked who he was with, and he stated that he was with Randall. And that's when the plans changed. The location where they were going to meet changed. But if this was, in fact, a plan to commit some type of homicide, I certainly believe that the state would have charged Mr. Shentis. And ultimately, he was never charged, and the punishment he's going to receive for his role that night is nothing. And so when we take that into context with what Mr. Alejandro Cantu's actions were on that night, I think that they were much more limited than the other two individuals that were involved. Ultimately, like I stated, there were 3 people who were charged in this case: Alejandro, his brother, and his cousin. One of those individuals ultimately took their case to a trial. One of those individuals, I think certainly it could be said that he committed perjury while testifying and did his best to minimize his role that night. And one of those individuals took responsibility and tried to keep the family from having to come in and testify and hearing everything that did come out. And that individual was Alejandro. And I think he certainly should get credit for taking that responsibility and owning up to what he did in fact do that night. This is really a case where I don't think we can say that there's any good guys or bad guys. These are all individuals, everyone that was involved, even the 2 females in the car that night, some of the other individuals that were on scene but not ultimately involved in this case. They're all suffering from addictions. And I think it's incredibly sad, and it's incredibly tragic for not only all of them, but for all of their family members. Because not only is Randall Denny now deceased and his family having to deal with that grief, but Mr. Cantu's family is going through the same. For any time that Mr. Cantu has to spend in prison, he has 6 daughters on the outside, and they are all going to be living without their father too. He has 2 little babies who were born since he's very soon before he was taken into custody. They don't know their dad at this point in time. And all of this stems from drugs. And I think we can all talk about how individuals, you know, they make the choice day in and day out to take substances and to further their addictions. But for Mr. Cantu, it started for him when he was at such a young age, just 14 years old. And it continued ever since. And this period of time that he spent incarcerated, so for the past almost, actually I think it is 2.5 years now at this point in time, that's his longest period of sobriety that he's had since the age of 14. And I think that speaks volumes of the types of addictions and the seriousness of them that we are dealing with and what we're looking at. So when we turn to Mr. Cantu's character, he's still a very young man. He just recently turned 34 years of age. He has 6 girls. He's an incredibly respectful individual. He's polite, he's kind, he's loyal to a fault, and he's a very passive individual. He's not aggressive in any sense. And I think a couple of individuals who wrote character letters on his behalf described him in just that sense. They used the term passive. And I do think that that is a good use or a good term to describe him. He has a very go with the flow attitude, and I can see how that, coupled by such a serious addiction, could put him in certain predicaments that he's found himself in the past. He does have a criminal history. I think that it is less significant than some of the cases that might come before the court or some of the individuals that come before the court. And it essentially does coincide with his substance use. He received juvenile referrals around the same time that he started using substances, and a review of each of the cases essentially shows that every time that he was charged with a crime, he was under the influence of something. And that is the same for this case itself. While he may not have been stumbling around on any of the videos that were shown to the court during that trial, he was impaired. And his ability to make good choices was incredibly affected. Part of, I think, why it's been a struggle for him to stop using or to attempt to stop using is because of his peer group. And this is a community where all of his friends, most of his associates around that time were using, and they're all struggling, they're all fighting the same battle. The state had indicated that he does have a violent history. They noted the 3 misdemeanor battery convictions on his record. I would note that besides those convictions, his record is void of any type of violence. Those convictions are very dated. The first one was one of his first, or I think it was his first adult conviction, so it was from when he was just 17 years old. The other ones, he would have been around 22 and 23 years old. They involved a relationship that Mr. Cantu was in at the time, both individuals struggling from substance use. Other than those convictions, I'm not aware of any type of violent history that he has. Again, he has no offenses in which he was alleged to have been carrying a firearm or any type of dangerous weapon. That's not his character. That's not who he is. He was sentenced to prison at a very young age for his first felony offense, and he has had periods of time where he's been on supervision and has been ordered to comply with different AODA assessments, and it's assumed any type of follow-through that would have come from that. But I think it's important to recognize that when somebody is so deep in an addiction that just placing them on supervision and ordering them to complete an assessment doesn't always do the trick. Just telling somebody that they have to complete something often isn't enough to get them to actually realize the significance of where they are at in their life and what they need to do. As I noted, Mr. Cantu now has 2.5 years of sobriety, which is his longest period of sobriety since he was 14 years old. I think I've talked a lot in my memorandum, and I think both defense attorneys agree here that Mr. Cantu does have a lot of rehabilitative needs. And one might ask, okay, well, what's going to be different now? Because he's been placed on supervision before in order to do these programs and these assessments, and he didn't take advantage of that. Well, I can tell the court that what's different now is that he does have these 2.5 years of sobriety, and he's spent the last 2.5 years thinking that he might spend the rest of his life in prison. And that was a wake-up call to him. I know from conversations that I've had with him that in the past, he was not ready to try to kick his addiction. He wasn't ready to take those steps. He wasn't taking it seriously. He's ready to do that now. He's told me that, and I have every reason to believe him. I think spending 2.5 years in a confined setting where you don't know what's going to happen, you don't know if you are going to get to hug your children at the end of the day, that's significant punishment. And fortunately, Mr. Cantu will hopefully be able to do that, no matter what the court imposes upon him today. But recognizing that he's spent those last 2.5 years not knowing what's going to happen, thinking about what he did on that night in question, thinking about what other individuals did on the night in question, that's punishment. He spent over one of these past 2.5 years at Waupun. That's a facility that has been on lockdown for a significant period of time. It was on lockdown while he was incarcerated there. Over 7 individuals have died at Waupun in the last 1 to 1.5 years. And Mr. Cantu, he spent time there. That's punishment. Not being able to go outside or to, get to hold his children or be a part of their lives for these last 2.5 years, that's all been punishment. And he agrees, and he acknowledged even to the PSI writer that punishment is appropriate here. He doesn't disagree with that. But I think an appropriate period of punishment is what we're asking the court to consider giving him. I've talked a little bit in my memorandum, so I just want to note for the record, again, kind of highlighting his young age and the ages that he was for his past criminal convictions. Science shows, and I think the courts have caught up to this understanding, that the male brain doesn't fully develop until the end of 20s usually. And so for the period of time where Mr. Cantu was receiving the majority of these convictions, it certainly could be said that his brain hadn't fully matured. And the parts that mature less, or the slowest, are the most important parts when it comes to making decisions and taking risks. Then we have the fact that, coupled with his young age, was his substance use history, which started at a very young age, that also slows the rate of brain maturation. So I think taking that into consideration, the fact that whenever Mr. Cantu does get out, he is past that point, his brain should have fully developed, he should understand the consequences of taking risks. And again, he is at a period of his life now where he is ready to move forward. I don't think there's a period of time, I think it was in 2015, when Mr. Cantu did participate in a 30-day substance use program, and he successfully completed it. But when asked essentially, why didn't that help you? Why didn't it work? What happened when you got out? His response was essentially the individuals that he went back to hanging out with. And he's had these last 2.5 years to understand that that needs to change if he's going to be able to maintain his sobriety, and he's ready for that. He is an incredible support system. I mean, looking out at the courtroom today, there's so many individuals here today that are in support of Mr. Cantu, and they have repeatedly showed up for him day in and day out, not only in the courtroom, but outside as well. They continue to call him and visit him as much as they can in whatever way that they can. And I know that his family is going to be there for him no matter what this court does with his sentence today. He's worked really hard since he has been in custody. There's not been a lot of opportunity for him to participate in programs or really gain any type of insight, but he's done what he can. And one of the things that I think he's most proud of, and rightfully so, is that he's worked really hard to obtain his GED. And he gained that certificate just a few weeks ago. So that is certainly an accomplishment that he has made since he's been in. I think also of note is the fact that Mr. Cantu has set realistic goals for himself. I think sometimes we come to sentencing hearings and individuals might say they have unrealistic goals that they've set. But Mr. Cantu realizes that he needs to continue the progress that he's made by obtaining his GED and to continue any type of educational courses that he can get while he is incarcerated. He has plans to hopefully obtain his barber's license, and then he will use that when he does get on the outside. I think also of note is the fact that because of this conviction, the type that it is, he's not going to be eligible for any type of earned release. So I'm not in charge of the DOC. I don't know what the likelihood of him getting into any type of programs will be because of that, but I think it is certainly much more limited and unlikely that he will be able to participate in any of those types of programs, but I know that he'll certainly participate in whatever is offered to him. When we look to the third galleon factor, the need to protect the public, I do fully believe with what I wrote in my sentencing memorandum that the public here can be protected by a shorter period of incarceration and a term of supervision. As noted, what is different today than what's occurred other times that Mr. Cantu's been sentenced is his readiness and his willingness to move on with his life, to stay sober, to put in the work to remain sober. He's going to take whatever he has learned these last 2.5 years and whatever he's able to learn during the rest of his confinement time and move forward with that. He wants to be able to gain the skills, whatever skills he does need to be a productive member of our society, to be a father for his children, and to be there to help raise them. He's going to disassociate himself with his peers and surround himself with a positive peer group. He's going to do everything that he can to stay clean and sober. Again, I just want to note the very limited violent history that Mr. Cantu has and how out of character this was for him. It really does stem from substance use issues. I do think that a period of punishment is appropriate, as does Mr. Cantu, but we are asking the court to consider a period of confinement that is less than what the state has proposed to the court. And I would be the first to acknowledge that 5 years of initial confinement may not seem like a lot. He was originally charged with intentional homicide, but I think that that type of sentence is fully appropriate for the facts of this case and for Mr. Cantu's background and who he is. I believe it was the brother of Mr. Denny stated today that Mr. Denny was so much more than an addict, and the same is true for Alejandro. He's so much more than that. He is also a son, a brother, a cousin, a friend, a dad. He's all of those things. He is so much more than his actions in this case. So we are asking the court to consider all of this information and to impose a sentence consisting of 5 years of initial confinement and 3 years of extended supervision. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cantu, this is your opportunity to address me if there's anything you're to say.
Yeah. I'd just like to apologize for what brings us here today. I didn't go there that morning with the intent to hurt anyone, and I never would have went there if I'd known someone was going to die. I can only imagine the pain that's been caused, something that I think about every day. I'm here to take responsibility for my actions. With the time that's given to me today, I plan to work on myself, do the programs that are available to me, remain sober, and when the time does come that I come home, be a better member of our community. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I've had the opportunity to address the court and the litigants in cases like this in the past, and the state alluded to it. Perfect justice in this case would be for me to be able to restore the victim to his families and to his family members, and to whatever issues brought Mr. Cantu to this situation to help fix those and return him to his family. And that would be perfect justice for everyone involved here. But that's certainly just beyond my ability as a judge to effectuate. And short of that, we end up having to try to determine what a term of years is appropriate in a case like this, and it's just not possible to translate the life of someone into a term of years. You can't do that. Mr. Cantu is entitled to a sentence that reflects his individualized situation, and I'm aware of that, and that's what I intend to do in this case. And in doing so, I need to consider the gravity of the offense, the character of the defendant, the need to protect the public, as well as other factors. I need to consider rehabilitative needs, punishment, deterrence, aggravating and mitigating circumstances that may apply. When I consider Mr. Cantu's character, I can't help but note all of the letters that were sent in for me to review. And they say a lot of very kind things. I read a letter from Devana Reactigui. Our daughters are at the age now where they need their dad to teach them and give them advice on things that I just don't understand due to never having a father myself growing up. Ms. Vera Cantu, there's not enough words out there to describe the heart he has. To say our family is blessed with him would be an understatement. Another letter indicates that Alejandro is a loving, kind, compassionate, responsible, and most of all, patient man. Another letter, Alejandro is a selfless, altruistic, compassionate, devoted, and caring family man. All of these letters speak very highly of who he is as a person, and I don't doubt for a minute but what the people that wrote me those letters have experienced Mr. Cantu in that fashion. And there's many people in support of him here today, and it's interesting because when I come in on cases in criminal matters, it's quite often that people who sit in the chair that he's sitting in have absolutely no one to stand up and support them, because it's not easy. And in this case, Mr. Cantu has a number of people who are in supporting him, and they clearly see something of value in him, and I think that speaks to his character. I noted in reading the pre-sentence investigation report that Mr. Cantu completed his GED. He was proud of that, and I give him credit for that because, frankly, not everyone does that. They don't have the fortitude to go back and finish off their degree, high school diploma, and he's done that. I think that speaks favorably of his character. I've listened to his words. I think that speaks favorably of his character. He's worked in the community according to the PSI. I think being employed is an indication that you're willing to go out and earn a living and support yourself and not make anyone else do it. And I think that speaks favorably of character as well. I consider his prior record. And, I've heard commentary on it. I find the record notable not because, frankly, of a number of convictions. I've seen people come in and more convictions than what he has, but it's replete with issues of substance abuse, and that's been referenced a lot here. And I'm not here to sentence him on necessarily testimony of people in that other trial, but one thing that's certainly notable about the circumstances surrounding this event, so many people were using drugs. So many people were using drugs. And it's just very sad as people get pulled into that. There are drug charges in this case. The fact of the matter is, when these illegal drugs come into our community, they bring with them in their wake all sorts of other crimes. As people commit robberies and burglaries and thefts and forgeries and other crimes in order to get the money to buy the drugs. In addition, people are overdosing and dying of these drugs. And in addition to that, when drugs are in the community, there's generally people who are selling the drugs, and there's people who are buying the drugs. And the problem, of course, is that when you enter into contracts, agreements with people regarding drugs, and there's problems develop in those agreements, you can't call law enforcement, you can't go to court, because those agreements are not enforceable. So what oftentimes happens is violence erupts. And that's another way people lose their lives surrounding drugs. Not by overdosing, being involved in situations where transactions in drugs are causing enforcement issues for the people involved, and people lose their lives. All of those things are a concern to the public. And the public looks to the court for protection from things like that. But I look at the record of Mr. Cantu. There's drug usage. I've noted the prior domestic abuse charges, and we can argue, well, they're old, they're dated. Mr. Cantu's not that old of an individual. And I've listened carefully as I've heard and I've read in the defense PSI about how young he is, and I am understanding about brain development as well. But at the end of the day, none of us are responsible for where we come from, but we're all responsible for where we're going. And at some point in time, you have to make decisions that I need to go in a different direction. And so these charges come in that he has, and he was involved in these domestic abuse offenses, and it's discouraging because his life is got those issues. They've got the drug usage, and here he is. It seems as if there's a downward trajectory that started when he was very young, both with drug usage and other criminal offenses. Nonetheless, those things reflect on character. When I consider the gravity of the offense, I've reflected on that as well, but frankly, we're dealing with the drug-related offenses in this case and a felony murder, and loss of life has a ripple effect in our community, and the gravity of this offense can't be overstated. There's been loss of life, and the loss of life not only affects the families that are here, but it affects the community. We've heard about how the victim in this case has children, and there'll be grandchildren and descendants beyond that, and this ripple will carry out through those generations, and frankly, we don't have any idea. I don't think research tells us how that actually impacts later generations and the people in this community who surround the people who have been impacted by that, and how that impacts the community. But it does. It has a ripple effect on our community. There's a need to protect the public. When things like this happen in the community, the public gets concerned about their own safety. So in this case, Mr. Cantu felt he was wronged, and he decided that as a result of this wrong, I'm not going to call law enforcement. I'm going to go take care of this myself. And I note that there's been I listened to the trial in the other case, and nobody's really owned the trigger. Nobody really has. And in fact, I think there's probably information that is still not clear, that's not all out there. And I'm not here to sentence on any of that, but the reality of it is Mr. Cantu decided I've been wronged, and I'm going to go take this into my own hands, and as a result, somebody's deceased, and the community is scared. The community is scared. So in reading the defense PSI, I note that it's referenced that the best way for the public to be protected under the circumstances would be to have Mr. Cantu serve a shorter amount of time in prison as punishment and then allow him to undergo supervision and treatment in the community. And I read that, and I did reflect, and it's been mentioned by defense counsel. That hasn't really worked in the past. I mean, I specifically went through and noted AODA issues that were cited in prior offenses, efforts that were made to get assistance with AODA issues, and it just didn't work. And the argument, I suppose, could be made, well, he's been sitting in jail for a while. That may be something that changes. But the mere fact that he's now been sitting in jail for a while doesn't convince me that we're going to have any greater success getting him into recovery and staying there having rehabilitative efforts made in the community. I'm just not convinced of it. I think our community needs more than this from our citizens. This event, some sort of effort to enforce individual rights to ownership of property that went awry and caused someone to be killed. The community demands more from that in Brown County. The families that live here want more than that. That's not what we're looking for in our community, and the public asks the court for protection from things like that. There are rehabilitative issues for sure. That will be undertaken. I'm counting on with the sentence that I'm going to impose. And there needs to be a punishment. Again, when the public sees these things going on in our community, they're afraid, and they look to the court and they seek a punishment. And I know that in the defense PSI, they referenced how really the public doesn't look towards these sentences in a deterrent. And there's some truth to that. I don't know how many people that are intending to commit crimes parse through the various sentences that people of those crimes get when they're convicted. But the public looks at these cases, they know what happened, they know what's going on in their community, and they seek some measure of punishment. I'm satisfied when I consider all the factors that I'm to consider in this case, that first of all, on the drug charges, that's in the 20 CF 1673, 20 CF 16, strike that, 21 CF 2124. On all of those counts, the court's going to impose what's recommended by the PSI writer, 1 year of initial confinement, followed by 2 years of extended supervision. Those are going to run concurrent to each other. I'll note that the PSI writer is recommending for the other, for the charge in the felony murder count, 15 to 18 years in prison, followed by 7 to 8 years of supervision. I understand, and what's been outlined, that their matrices don't necessarily apply to this unclassified charge, and but frankly, it's not necessarily the matrix that I need to look at. Matrices are nothing more than more compilation of other cases and outcomes and that sort of thing, and this is supposed to be about Mr. Cantu. I'm satisfied, however, that I am going to impose 15 years of initial confinement in the Wisconsin prison system on that count. I'm going to impose 10 years of extended supervision. I think that's an appropriate sentence in light of the factors that I'm required to consider. And as conditions, I'm going to require that he maintain absolute sobriety, an AODA assessment and follow through, no contact with either Gustavo Cantu or Jacob Ventura, no contact with the family of RMD, no association with any known users or dealers of illicit drugs, full-time employment and or schooling or a combination of both, compass evaluation and follow through, court costs, and that'll be concurrent to the sentences in the other 3 counts that I just imposed. The credit that I understand exists on the 1673 file is 331 days, and then on the 2124 file, 287 days. Is there any objection to that, Mr. Lizay?
No, Your Honor.
Ms. Rock, on your file, do you want to be heard on anything regarding credit?
I believe there's 609 days.
The objection to that, Mr. Lizay?
I don't think so. I just wanted to confirm he wasn't serving any other sentence during at that point. I don't think he was, so that's fine.
609 days, understanding that my experience with these things are that I will hear back from DOC if somehow that number has been miscalculated, and they'll tell me that there's a correction to be made, and then I'll let both parties be heard if they want to be. That's going to be the order of the court. Questions, clarifications regarding my order, Mr. Lizay?
No, Your Honor.
Ms. Rock?
No, thank you.
Mr. Mr. Lopez?
No, Your Honor, thank you.
Very good. Then the matter is concluded. Thank you.
Any questions?
Sneak by. I think when I get your shoes.
Well, it still computes differently, right? So you still have like 45 days on the one and then. Yeah. No, year and a half.
No, I just, it's
It's all together. Okay.